Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about the ship's cruise books. So, first off, you might hear some banging overhead in this video. That's part of our deck force ripping up the teak on the O1 level 2 stories above us. While some of the wood is very rotten, some of it is very well attached, it turns out. So they are tearing that up. Remember, if you are interested in buying some of the teak we removed from the deck in the process of replacing it with new teak, there's a link in the description to our gift shop where you can buy pieces. So, cruise books seem to start around World War II. There might be a couple that exist prior to that. And by the 1960s, they seem to be pretty well established as a thing. A cruise book you can think of as a yearbook. It's very similar to a school yearbook. Modern ones have the individual pictures of people, although older ones do not tend to. There's a link in the description to a website that has a bunch of different cruise books in it, including most of the ones from this ship's active period, although it's missing at least the last cruise book, Modern Dreadnought up here, from 1989-1990, and it's missing these two books, Dreadnought Returns and Dreadnought Farewell, which are technically not cruise books, but are sort of companion pieces to Dreadnought 1968-1969 about our Vietnam service. So I consider all those cruise books. However, these two, Dreadnought Returns, Dreadnought Farewell, are produced by Life magazine correspondent Neil Leifer, and so are copywritten differently. They're not government produced like the other cruise books, which are open source. So, there are a number of different cruise books, starting with the War Log here, which covers our entire World War II service. It's got the track of where we sailed, which is pretty common in the cruise books, although a normal cruise book covers a single deployment, which is usually 6 to 9 months, although sometimes a different length of time. This one covers basically the entire 43 to 45 period. It's got a ton of pictures in it taken on board the ship, and it's also got pictures of each individual division. Now, in a more modern cruise book, instead of these division pictures, like I said, you've got the individual mug shots like a traditional yearbook. But this is pretty much the beginning of the system. Interesting thing, if you're on that website, you're going through different cruise books, look at the different battleship cruise books. Even for ships operating in the same divisions at the same time period, say Iowa and New Jersey, the divisions that the crew is broken into are not identical. And that's really interesting to me and something I'm still looking into. So if you have any insight in that, let us know. That's our only 1940s cruise book. We're decommissioned shortly after that. And then we get into the 1950s era, in which we've got 3 different cruise books here. One for our first Korean War deployment, one for our second Korean War deployment, and one for the post-Korean War training period. Now, interestingly, we don't have cruise books that cover every period of the ship's career. I think this one's from 1957. So from roughly 1953 until 1956, we've got no cruise book coverage. When you guys send me an email and ask, hey, my so-and-so said they were on the ship, I don't have any documentation, were they on the ship? My main place for looking is in these books. So if you can give me information about what they did, they were a gunner, or they worked in an engine room, and what years you think they were on board, that helps me narrow it down. I can check these cruise books. However, like I said, we've got entire periods of the ship's career where we don't have a cruise book for them. So, you know, if they served on this ship from 54 to 57, I may not be able to find that out. Here you can see by the late 50s, they've already gone to the traditional yearbook style. Again, flip through these on your own. If you are, say, writing a book on Iowa-class battleships, this is all photography taken on board by government photographers, so they are open source. You can use this for your own papers, books, whatever the case may be. Which is why this website here is such a great resource. You can see what's out there, and maybe those pictures aren't a high enough scan, but you can still say, hey, I really love this picture of USS Iowa's mess decks. I want to use that for a paper I'm writing for school. You can reach out to USS Iowa and see if they've got an original cruise book that they can do a scan of. So, after these Korean War books, we get up to the Vietnam era books, which again, we've got Return and Farewell, which document the recommissioning and decommissioning process. And I believe these books had jackets originally. And then we've got Dreadnought 1968-1969, which is the one you actually see on the website there, because none of these pictures are trademarked the way the Returns and Farewell pictures are. So a lot of these show day-to-day life on the ship. Some of them maddeningly don't show that. So the ones from the 1950s really show more what the crew was doing when they were visiting foreign ports, and less how they were living on the ship. And I think that's a product of what these were. Much like a high school yearbook will show sporting events and that sort of stuff, it doesn't show like kids sitting in classes. Like, you remember your duty station and you remember your berthing station. We don't need pictures of that. You just spent a year living there. So for a historian like me, it's a little bit maddening. But you know, some of them do better than others with that. This is interesting. I don't know that any other ship has multiple books written about a single year-long deployment. That's probably not true. I just can't think of one right now. Let's see. Got another sort of cruise book, Pac Mid Tra Ron 1969, which is about different training activities and squadron activities that took place when New Jersey was active. And it includes Battleship New Jersey, but it's not an individual ship's cruise book. So there are similar books like this that are created by training facilities. The Naval Academy has similar books like this, and then there are books like this that might be more squadron specific than individual ship specific. Let's see. And finally, we get into the 80s, a period for which we've got 4 cruise books to cover 11 years. So again, there's a lot of gaps in that section. But these cover the major deployments. They don't cover the yard periods or the training periods that the ship had. So, for example, the first one is about our year-long deployment to Lebanon and other places. We've got 2 more in the middle. One of them is about our sailing down to Australia. It's called Big Thunder Down Under for the Australian bicentennial. And then we've got Modern Dreadnought here, which is the one that is pretty recent and doesn't exist in many copies, which is not, whoever made the website did not get the chance to scan this yet. So the museum currently only has 2 copies of this, the one in my office and the one in the collection. All of these other books, we've got dozens and dozens and dozens of the former crew have donated. And I hold out hope that as these 1990 era sailors start to retire and donate their collections, that more of these will come in through the door. And that'll help researchers going forward. Now, just because we already have a bunch of these doesn't mean we don't want more. If you are in possession of some of these, particularly Battleship New Jersey cruise books, and you'd like to donate them, feel free to reach out to the curatorial department here and ask about doing that. Or if you've got cruise books from any other ship and you'd like to donate them. If you are looking for hard copies of these yourself, they tend to show up on places like eBay pretty frequently, depending on which copy of the book. And they tend to sell for three figures, a little over $100, which is pretty comparable to other actually produced history books that are hardcover and color pictures and that sort of stuff, like any of the Naval Institute Press books, like my Bible here. There is a whole industry that's sprung up that produces cruise books, and I'm fairly certain it's got some overlap with the high school yearbook industry. So I don't know how this started back during World War II and how they got the initial batches of these produced, but nowadays different ships can basically, you take all the pictures, you write all the text on board, and there's usually a committee on board that has at least an officer, maybe the public affairs officer, or maybe the crew welfare and morale officer in charge of it. It might have been the chaplains on this ship, I'm not entirely sure. And so they are producing the content, much like a school has a yearbook committee, and then they are sending it to a printer that specializes in books like these. And it's a little bit like self-publishing, but just like with high school yearbooks, there's the whole industry built up. And I imagine that it would have been like a high school yearbook in that you had to say, go to the store and say, hey, I want one, or no, I don't want one. And then they specifically order, there's 2,000 guys on the crew, 1,500 want them. They order 1,500 books and then they hand them out. And maybe they order 1,600 and they have some in the store in case family members or others, people who had initially said, no, I don't have the money right now, decide that they want one. In addition to the cruise books, the crew also produces other printed documents. This ship is large enough that it has its own print shop, and we'll probably cover that in future videos, but a pretty common production item from the print shop is a newspaper called the Jerseyman. And in some instances, those are pretty sporadic. Like during World War II, they seem to be released whenever they're released. In other instances, like in 1953, they seem to be a fairly weekly production item. And again, that's self-published on board in our print shop. The content is created by crew members in their off-duty hours, much like a high school newspaper. So the crew members are writing articles and coming up with stuff and sending it to the print shop, and it's being printed there when they're not doing other things like fleet publications and technical stuff. But we'll probably do a future video where we pull out some of the Jerseymen and talk about the different newspapers that were produced on board throughout the ship's career. So be sure to check the link in the description. We've got another video we've done where we show off one of the Jerseymen's from around 1983. But these were produced on board throughout basically the ship's entire career. And sometimes they had different names, but Jerseyman seems to be the name that was there for most of the ship's career. Thanks for watching. Remember, if you have any questions or comments, drop them in the comment section down below. Go through those various cruise books that are on that website and tell me which one's your favorite. What ships do really cool cruise books? Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, but also from a number of other sources, especially viewers like you. The Department of State helps cover our operating expenses, but it's the donations from viewers like you that go directly to our YouTube channel because you've told us that that's what your donation is for. And that has allowed us in the last year to go from making a single video a week to making one just about every day of the week. Remember to like, share, and subscribe so that you're notified when all of those new videos come out. And thank you for your continued support, and thanks for watching today.